Hello, I'm Greg Forster, the Executive Director of the American Academy of Sciences and Letters. And here with me today is Gary Anderson, one of our 2024 Berry Prize winners, the Berry Prize for Distinguished Intellectual Achievement. Gary is the Hesburgh Professor of Catholic Theology at the University of Notre Dame. Gary, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate.
Congratulations on winning the Berry Prize, and I suppose also congratulations on an upcoming birthday from the balloons in the background.
Oh, that's why the birthday, remarks. Yes, my wife, well, we're both, hitting 70 this spring. So that's a big year. So pulling out all stops to celebrate.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations on that, which is the Berry Prize is almost as great an achievement as making it to 70. Let
Thank
me
you.
begin by asking you, what are some underappreciated ways in which the work in your field contributes to human understanding and well-being?
That's a great question. And I guess the great example I would give to that issue it concerns actually the general public's understanding of the nature of religion, world religions, their place within world civilization. I can remember when I taught at Harvard, there was a conference at the Center for the Study of World Religions, and someone, the scholar's name I no longer recall, was talking about the United States presence in Tehran, Iran, leading up to the days of the Islamic Revolution in the 70s and the Jimmy Carter era. And we had an enormous staff there. If you've watched the movie Argo, you certainly know that, an enormous staff. And the claim was that we understood, every inch of contemporary Iranian culture, economics, education, all the standard, kind of tools of measuring a culture. But the one thing that was not measured and that people had no understanding of was religious observance on the ground. And it wasn't because of some, prejudicial decision. We're not going to study that. It was rather simply ignorance of the fact that it would be important in any way. And of course, that had tragic, results, incredible results of simply not foreseeing what was happening, and as it happened, not understanding the gravity of the situation. So I guess that example, for me, over the course of my career, simply emphasizes how important it is at a curricular level that we educate, young people coming through the university about, religions, globally. That is crucial for understanding human culture across the world, and frequently because of the, I guess, residual secularity, certainly in North America and Europe, underappreciated in terms of its global significance. So I would say, so that is an example I realize from the 70s, but I think it's a problem that perdures to the present day.
And we can't only study religion from a social scientific standpoint, sort of measuring behaviors. If we really want to understand religious behavior, we have to have some sense of the meaning of religion, what it means for the people who believe in it. So theological disciplines contribute to human understanding in that way.
I think that's an excellent point. I think that also maybe raises another challenge in contemporary, study of religion in American universities, is it often tends to be filtered through categories that are deeply important to, of course, secular Americans, the role of women, social or sexual orientation, et cetera, et cetera. All those questions, of course, are certainly important, but they have a tendency in university education in the United States to kind of elbow out other concerns that would be native to the practitioners of those religions. So it's understandable that this happens when we, look at the other, especially an other from a very different culture than ours. We try to reach for those elements in another culture that are similar to ours. It's certainly an initial step to understanding. But if that becomes the only way we engage For example, Islam in Iran were not going to understand Islam in Iran in its, native environment. And to understand, Iranian culture, you need to do that.
I think in some cases, the needed transition is from thinking of religion as an eccentric thing that some people are hung up on, to thinking of it as a normal part of human life. Even if you personally don't believe in it, you need to recognize that it is normal and part of human life, so that you will take it seriously and give it the kind of explanatory place that it ought to have in an understanding of human behavior.
Yeah, I guess I was going to give, a more pedestrian example. I mean, one of the things that's happened over the course of my lifetime is that retirement plans have moved from what a company or a corporation provides for you to what you essentially provide for yourself. And most of us, certainly in the humanities like myself, understand very little about the stock market and investments, but it behooves you to at least learn something because your future as a retired person is going to depend on decisions you're going to make. So, in all areas of life, we're forced to um, develop levels of competency that allow us to make our way in the world. And I think understanding of world religions is certainly one of those areas. And I think one of the challenges, certainly in the modern academy, is an underlying prejudice against religion. You know, frequently prevents people from seeing its curricular importance. So for me, at least from my field, that's a huge desideratum for university learning.
Amen to that. You know, it's very difficult to become fluent in a new language, but it's much easier to become conversant. And I
Yeah.
love your example of retirement funding. If you don't become at least conversant in how finances work, you're not going to be able to make your way. Let me ask you a second question. What would you say are the one or two most important challenges right now for maintaining high intellectual standards in your field?
So, I mean, as you mentioned, I'm the Hesburgh Professor of Catholic Theology, but my specialization in that enormous field happens to be the Bible. And within the field of the Bible, it's the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament. And that's a discipline that's very philologically driven. The best scholars in the area are frequently the ones that have the most detailed mastery of the principal language in question, which of course is ancient Hebrew, not modern Hebrew. But good scholars, of course, are facile to varying degrees in languages contemporary with Biblical Hebrew, including classical Akkadian, Aramaic. Some people even learn hieroglyphic Egyptian. And the challenge all along in my career, certainly for a school to be able to produce the highest caliber type of scholar in these areas, is maintaining, the ability to teach these languages. The same would be true of classics as well, Greek and Latin, because the normal metric that a dean is going to use in terms of staffing, departments and languages is going to be, the number of uh, uh, for lack of a better term, rear ends that occupy seats, in a classroom. That's a huge priority for deans. And these languages that, ancient languages that don't have a lot of, speakers, some have no speakers at all, require a commitment on the part of the university to offer so that scholars can study cultures from antiquity. So this wouldn't be true simply of the Bible, but people who work in Sanskrit, ancient Chinese, all of these disciplines, I think, suffer from, a similar set of challenges. In the advent of, basically the kind of pedagogical infrastructure that's grown up since COVID, especially Zoom as we're using now, I think there are opportunities for universities to provide this kind of specialized instruction that won't require, hiring scholars, on the ground in every institution. But being committed to teaching languages that don't have the kind of normal, I guess the professional term is FTE, student admission numbers is a huge issue. And then I think maybe one other thing I would mention too, this is something that I think is going to emerge as a challenge in light of AI. One of the things that AI, of course, can do quite uh, incredibly is translate materials. So I can see, looking forward 5 or 10 years, departments of German, French, and the like, Russian, starting to crater or collapse themselves because people will say, well, why should I invest all the time in learning these spoken languages when I can just pull out my phone and translate whatever I need? Um, I mean, I look forward to that moment. There's many things that I would like to read. I don't control all the world's languages. There's many things I would love to be able to put through an AI bot and be able to read. But I think for anyone who's a serious student of language knows that translation is never just a simple one-for-one correspondence. When you translate any language, even a modern language, into English, an AI bot or a human person is making all kinds of decisions that you, the reader, might, want to know about or make those decisions differently. And the only way to intelligently make those judgments is to know the language in question. So I guess I just wonder going forward if this is going to have a huge impact on the way in which we are going to be able to interact at a sophisticated, serious level with peoples who speak other languages. I guess if I was going to give a kind of, I mentioned the um, retirement plans as a similar example. Here I might think of what a lot of people have already noticed is a result of using GPS systems, for example, to find your way around town, which are fantastic. I mean, I use my GPS all the time. But the problem with the GPS is that you're not looking at a map. You don't learn the geography of the place you're in. You get to your destination, but you have no idea how it happened. You couldn't plot it out on a map. You become, in a sense, completely ignorant of the topography, which I think there's a certain sadness there. And we can't go back. People aren't going to give up GPS for maps so they can learn the topography. But I think we should realize that something is really being lost as we, rely on, GPS systems to or orient ourselves in a geographical location. And I think there will also be a loss if AI becomes our modality for understanding, documents, texts, speech in other languages.
For a century, one of the hottest topics in philosophy has been the relationship between language and thought, with positions ranging from an extreme postmodernism that says thought never really escapes language. It's all culture, right?
Right.
To an extreme sort of reactionary modernism, if you will, that demands a thought that is independent of language. And probably the truth is somewhere in between, but AI is now going to make these discussions very, very high stakes.
Yes.
And you bring up the issue of translation, and I feel that tension. My dissertation was on Augustine, and on the one hand, I lament there's an enormous literature on Augustine that's in languages I don't have. And
Right.
I'm reliant on secondary conversations that give me no more than fragments
Right.
about that. And yet, at the same time, if people begin routinely relying on AI, for example, to read Augustine in a translation made by an AI rather than having the Latin or using a highly reliable English translation, well, boy, the nuances of Augustine's Latin are very, very important. We don't want to miss things like that.
That's exactly right. And if you're translating it yourself, you realize with every word you're rendering from Latin into English, all the decisions you're making in terms of you're foreshortening this option, that option that you can see because you know Latin well. And again, I say this not because I rue the introduction of AI to translate. I mean, whether you rue it or not, it's coming. That train is coming. And I think there will be, to be fair and honest here, tremendous benefits from employing that kind of technology. But as you indicate, I think there's going to be significant losses as well. as using GPS, essentially takes us out of the world of concrete geographical space. You might want to say AI instruments translating text will take us out of the really, I think, a principal humanistic category of, figuring out how to render the meaning of one word in one civilization to another word in another civilization, which is actually an example of great intercultural, understanding. It's one of the reasons I also love working in foreign languages, and I think it's sad that people aren't taking them anymore, is it's a discipline that takes you out of yourself. Even if we're learning contemporary German, it's a different way of seeing the world when you learn German. But when you learn an ancient language, of course, it's not only a different, a different set of words, but just a completely different, way of understanding human life, which I think is, desperately needed. We tend to get closed in and we can only imagine the world the way we see it.
I think of C.S. Lewis talking about literature giving us windows into how other people see the world. We're going to need to think very carefully about the dependency of those windows on the languages in which they're expressed. So I guess the takeaway is buy stock in hermeneutics.
There we go.
Hermeneutics is going to be the big discipline.
Yeah, I certainly hope that's the case.
Our colleagues who work in hermeneutics will be very pleased. Let me ask you one more question. In what ways does the public at large have a good understanding of the mission of the university? And in what ways does it maybe lack a good understanding of the mission of the university?
So that's a great question. I would maybe want to slightly reframe it this way. Um, a big challenge, I think, when, especially humanistic scholars write books for the public or for their discipline. The challenge always for me is that you want to render accurately the culture and world you're studying. That's one desire. But the other desire is, well, what difference would any of this make for the average reader? And those aren't always easy to correlate. I sometimes get very exasperated with people who put down humanistic scholars like myself because what we write about doesn't intersect at all with their lives. That's a legitimate, criticism. I understand it and take it seriously. On the other hand, I usually try to write in such a way that I am doing that, but the way in which it will intersect with their life is going to demand of them that they take seriously, a set of documents and thoughts that are different, at least at first blush, sometimes very different from who they are. So that, I think very easy criticism to weigh in on scholars about is that they're writing about things that don't touch me. Can be a legitimate, criticism of what I do, what we do, but it also can be a criticism, I think, of the person, voicing that sentence, that they're not willing to stop and say, well, maybe Elizabethan England is different than my world, or the world of the Persian Empire in which many biblical books were written, is also different than my world, and I'll have to spend some time trying to orient myself to that world in order to, benefit from what, the people in that world might say about me. So I guess what I would want to say is that we need really, I think we need a back and forth here. I do agree with the criticism. I think humanists need to take seriously the questions that the average reader might pose to the things we study. On the other hand, I think the average reader also has to be willing to take a step out of their comfort zone and, enter into a universe and world quite different than theirs.
It's the intellectual equivalent of saying you need to get out more.
That's exactly right.
I think here of Alan Bloom said once, we used to say to students, these authors know things you don't know and need to know. They see things that you don't see and would benefit from seeing. But now we say, these authors can help you think about the questions you already care about, which reduces these classic authors to mere tools that we use for our 21st century or for Alan Bloom 20th century concerns. And we're narrowing the range of our vision by
No,
doing that.
exactly. Exactly. And it's all going back to, I guess, a question or an issue I've raised a couple of times in our conversation about seeing the world through eyes different than your own, which I think is one of the tasks of certainly a university education, but also one of the tasks of, writing books.
Right. Well, Gary, thank you so much for this fascinating conversation. And thank you for the excellent work you do at Notre Dame. And congratulations again on winning the Berry Prize.
Thank you so much. It was a true honor, and I hope I can do justice to the honor that's been, shown me.